Gazcool led us to Armageddon. Gazcool told us to stomp the humans and knock the cities down. Where's Gazcool now? Zogged off across the galaxy when the going got tough. That's where. Don't matter. We ain't going anywhere, lads. When Armageddon belongs to the orcs, it won't be Gazcool's world. It'll be mine.
Welcome back, my friends. Today, we're going to be painting Boss Snickrot and the Old Sculpt, which is really one of my favorite orc models that ever came out. I was lucky enough to find one on eBay a little bit ago. And in the honor of the galactic holiday that is Orktober, I thought this would be a perfect time to give you all of Snickrot's lore. Now, sadly, he doesn't have the most, but I thought it'd be cool to give you some of his personal lore and some of the lore of the Blood Axes themselves, which is like, he's the main guy of. So now, before we get into the Green Ghost himself, a quick disclaimer with the paint job. You might be wondering why later on I have the base painted and then it comes off. Had an issue with the sand sticking, but it got fixed. But anyway, without further ado, let's learn about the Blood Axes. Orcs of the Blood Axe clan display a compulsion to apply strategy and tactics to their battles. Being orcs, such approaches are invariably direct and extremely violent, and often colored more by what will be the most enjoyable way to get stuck in than what is ultimately the most expedient course. That said, for the average Blood Axe, there is no greater joy than catching an enemy in a ferocious ambush, pulverizing them with a headlong armor charge, or proving to the mocking gits of the other clans that the Blood Axe way works best. The fact is, the rest of Orkdom will never be convinced that the Blood Axe's strange behavior makes them anything other than untrustworthy cowards. Their ways are just too alien. Blood Axes deploy commando mobs to sever enemy communication channels and blow up supply depots, employing high-altitude flyovers and Defcopter scouting to determine where the enemy are in advance. Most shocking to other orcs, Blood Axes will even attack the enemy where their lines are weak instead of charging headlong into the meat grinder of the biggest and best available fight. They fail to grasp that Blood Axes like a rowdy punch-up just as much as any orc. They just prefer the odds to be in their favor when they get stuck in. The Blood Axe clan has no overarching color. Instead, they prefer to drape themselves in as many camouflage schemes as possible. They grasp that such measures are intended to conceal their warriors, but being orcs, they ascribe a talismanic rather than literal value to the practice. This leads to Blood Axes going to war in all manner of garish patterns that bear little resemblance to the landscape around them. It has also seen them paint even airborne or super heavy war engines in all manner of outlandish camouflage patterns, reasoning that the busier and more thickly applied the scheme, the better the vehicle will be hidden. The actual value of such concealing measures is hard to quantify, but anyone who has seen a 50-foot Stampa lumbering towards them, daubed in red and blue tiger stripes, doesn't forget the terrifying sight in a hurry. The orcs of the other clans might look at the Blood Axes askance, but these cunning fighters are a terrible shock for their enemies. Many foes have simply refused to believe in the notion of strategically capable orcs until it's too late. For their part, the Blood Axes don't care what anyone else thinks of them. They prize results over reputation, and are more than happy to let the other clans take the brunt of the battle's punishment, whilst they use distraction to seize victory. Now that we have a primer of who the Blood Axes are, let's go to the most notable one of all, Boss Snickrot. Boss Snickrot is that most terrifying of things, an orc with an agenda, and the feral intellect to back it up. Arguably the most cunning, sneaky, and vicious orc commando in the galaxy, Snickrot haunts the equatorial jungles of the world of Armageddon. The infamous orc hunters of the Armageddon Imperial Guard fear only one orc. On the darkest nights, these grizzled veterans whisper tales of Boss Snickrot, the Stalker. They tell of a killer who could pass through the throttlevine groves without disturbing a single leaf, and of his luckless victims, left to bleed to death with their eyes put out and their scalps ripped free. Boss Snickrot was a commando in high regard when Gazcool first fell upon Armageddon, His was amongst the first tribes to navigate the green hell separating Armageddon Prime from Armageddon Secundus. However, when they ran into the jungle defenses around Cerberus Base, they were all but annihilated. Snickrot pulled his commandos out of the debacle and led them away to the thick jungle, vowing that they would conquer the environment before taking on the Imperial forces. They did this with a single-minded focus, becoming one with their savage environs. Snickrot and his lads strapped their kit back to bare essentials. They refined their talents for stealth and sabotage until they were able to slip undetected into Astra Militarum positions, butchering and slitting the throats of all within them. By the time Gazkul returned to Armageddon for his second, even greater Wa, the Red Skull Commandos, so named for daubing their heads in their victims' blood, were infamous. By this time, the legend of Snickrot has spread to hive cities across the planet's surface. Some spoke of a feral ghost who drank the blood of his prey, while others told of a murderous beast who wore the dog tags of his victims upon his chain-wrapped forearms, the better to whisper their names to the jungle moon. To this day, Snickrot is one of the most feared of all his brutal kind. Of late, even some orcs have worried that their own necks could fall under the Stalker's knives. With the demons of chaos spilling onto Armageddon, Imperial and Orc forces have been compelled, in extreme cases, to temporarily fight side by side against a greater threat. Snickrot sees such compromise as weakness. More than one knob has been dragged into the shadows, his severed head turning up on a spike shortly afterwards, as a warning against mobbing up with the Yumis. Snickrot's terrifying kunnin has become so legendary that even when other orcs can't see him, they are adamant that he must be nearby. This has allowed the Green Ghost to conduct sneaky missions throughout the system and further afield, without the knowledge of his allies, let alone his enemies, all in pursuit of his long-term conquest. And with that, let's go to the spinny shots. Boss Snickrot, the leader of the Red Skull Commandos, a very, very fun orc. I really wish there was more about him though. Well, he has his reputation in Armageddon, but there isn't too much writing about him, you know? But alas, the concept is there of this giant orc sneaking through the jungle, just killing everything. And it's absolutely great. But if you've hung out this long, make sure to go check me out on Twitch if you want to hang out. I stream 3 or 4 nights a week over at twitch.tv/drinkyourpaintwaterlive. Also, give me a subscribe and a like on here. I super appreciate it. And it is very helpful being a smaller and newer channel. And be excited for the next video, because it is going to be very big and very gross. I'll see you in the next one.